So much for going beyond movies, huh? There's trouble among the stars as Paramount Network pivots away from its ambitions of joining the likes of AMC and FX. Will the change to Paramount Movie Network help them mount better competition? Or after less than 3 years, is the mountain beginning to crumble? The groundwork for what would become Paramount Network began to be laid in 2015, as Viacom began to transform the previously male-skewing Spike into a more generalist and gender-neutral outlet, with a rounding off of some of the channel's rougher content edges and new forays into scripted programming. The emphasis, according to network president at the time, Kevin Kay, was on big talent, engaging shows, and the hits that get people talking. The shift was both marked, with the network launching a new brand package and ditching its former logo of 9 years for something considerably more generalist, and simultaneously a continuation of the network's crawl out of the lowbrow gutter the network occupied in the 2000s. A fight that had been going on all decade so far, with the creation of things like Bar Rescue and Ink Master. The new iteration of Spike started strong, with its first original, Lip Sync Battle, becoming the highest rated unscripted premiere in the network's history, and their first scripted miniseries, Tut, exploring the life of the Egyptian pharaoh, averaging an impressive 2.2 million viewers over its 3-night run. In 2017, Viacom announced perhaps the biggest step so far in the evolution of what was then Spike. A total break from the past decade and a half with a rebrand to Paramount Network. New Viacom CEO Bob Bakish set out to refocus the company around 6 core brands, including Paramount, and there would thus be much bloodshed through disrepair elsewhere, and in creating Paramount Network, Bakish was looking to have a flagship outlet for scripted programming rather than spreading the expenditure across a number of outlets, as had been the case earlier in the decade. Paramount Network aspired to go toe-to-toe with the likes of AMC and FX, and the network's initial series output reflected that, with a spate of high-end miniseries such as Waco and Yellowstone, along with American Woman, a transplant from TV land, and the eventually much maligned Heathers, based on the 1989 movie that is perhaps better known for being a musical. The fact that we can't get mass shootings under control in this country pushed that show back for 6 months before Viacom felt they finally had enough and put the show out of its misery in a butchered form across 5 nights in October 2018. Paramount Network would back up their scripted ambitions with continued investment in unscripted programming, both in continuing most of Spike's former content and producing some new fare. Among this bunch was more Lip Sync Battle, the continuation of Bar Rescue and Ink Master, the events of corporate sibling MMA promotion Bellator, which Spike had aired since 2013 following a 2-year stint on MTV2 of all places, and inexplicably, a reboot of Wife Swap. Mishmash of old and new aside, Paramount Network seemed to be slowly but surely building a name for itself, with a considerable content push that offered admirable heaps of variety. Other networks have tried to establish, or re-establish, themselves with far less than the drive Viacom put into Paramount Network, even given the multiple missteps and unfortunate circumstances that would befall some of its shows. Besides the Heathers thing, the 7th season of Bar Rescue would premiere just as the coronavirus pandemic began to shut bars down, and the network would ultimately be forced to cancel Cops, which the network had been airing for the past 7 years after being a Saturday night staple for 25 seasons on Fox, in June 2020 in the wake of protests for racial justice. Things were changing, however, as Viacom and CBS Corporation danced in the moonlight, rented a motel room, and merged in December 2019 into ViacomCBS, bringing the pair together again after nearly 14 years apart. Though, ultimately, they were owned by the same corporate parent all along, so does that make this analogy in? You know what, never mind. With the re-merger came cost-cutting, and throughout 2020, ViacomCBS cut back on scripted development for Paramount Network, making the well-received 68 Whiskey a one-and-done, too much fan ire, and not moving forward with planned dramedy Emily in Paris, which eventually went to Netflix. On September 22nd, ViacomCBS announced their new plans for Paramount Network, a retool into a movie channel to be redubbed as Paramount Movie Network within the next year. The new angle? 52 new, original, made-for-TV movies each year, likely one a week, featuring presently unspecified major talent, largely produced through corporate sibling arms both domestic and international, in addition to at least one new scripted series or miniseries each quarter, such as the continuing Yellowstone, but with the format retooled to fit in with the movies. Unscripted programming will be no more, for the first time quite possibly ever, spanning the entire 37-year history of the channel space, as the Nashville, the National Network, Spike, and Paramount Network, and to that effect, Ink Master and the Wife Swap reboot were cancelled, the former after 13 seasons spanning 8 years. Other unscripted fare, like Bar Rescue and Lip Sync Battle, is set to move elsewhere, to ViacomCBS sibling outlets currently unspecified. Bellator MMA fights are now on CBS Sports Network as of October 1st. The massive retool is similar to the shift currently happening at Comedy Central as they drop out of live-action series development to go headlong into adult animation in addition to original specials and movies. ViacomCBS plans to make around 100 movies a year for its portfolio, 52 earmarked for Paramount Network, as aforementioned, and 20 to 30 each heading to Comedy Central and MTV. Almost immediately when I heard this news, my first thought was, they're throwing their equity away. 2 years is simply not enough time to establish a new network, but it seems that that's all AMC executives have been willing to give ambitious new projects with the potential to flourish before declaring them a flop and burning the house down. We saw it with The Hub, we saw it with Universal Kids, and now we're seeing it for the third time in the past decade here. My Network TV, fair that it became, at least put in 3 years of effort, admittedly under 2 different strategies, the latter a 2-year stint, before effectively throwing in the towel at their hopes of being a new 6th major network. The CW, now a corporate half-sibling, took 5 years to find its footing before it eventually gained steam. AMC and FX, which Paramount Network looked to emulate, both needed about 6 years to really establish themselves as the premium content destinations they are today. 2 years, or really 21 months if you want to be exact, is just far too early to judge this sort of thing. Viewing habits change at a slower pace than the fickle needs of executives or investors, and some audiences may not be swayed until a pre-existing crop of series churns out and opens up more free time to try new offerings. ViacomCBS, and all broadcasters honestly, need to understand that, and should invest more into playing the long game, even if it will feel like early series in the first few years are little more than wasted efforts. Some may not remember The Shield or Nip Tuck by now, but it paved the way for FX to make the likes of American Horror Story, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Atlanta. Likewise, few may recall Gossip Girl or The Game fondly from the early days of the CW, but Riverdale, the Golden Globe-winning Jane the Virgin, or a bona fide superhero TV show renaissance wouldn't be able to exist without them. AMC just happened to get lucky in not having to spin their wheels so hard, but it still took them a while to build enough of a content catalog for their reputation to precede them. All of this just can't happen in 2 years. It all needs more time to gestate. Pulling the plug so naively and so soon may prove a damaging, and perhaps even suicidally fatal mistake. My second thought on this retool was, Lifetime original movies, here we come. However, the new Paramount Movie Network seems to be trying to beat that assumption, or any allusions to Hallmark Channel you may also be making, as the budgets for each of these new movies will purportedly be in the low to mid 7-figure range. Thinking about that, that actually sounds like a lot of money. Assuming each movie is, say, $5 million to produce, a year of new content for Paramount Movie Network on films alone is $260 million. Even if you cut that number down considerably, say to $2 million apiece, the expenditure is still 9 figures. In that case, just barely so at $104 million. And again, this is before they spend more money on the 4 miniseries a year they also have planned. Maybe I just don't have any idea of what a slate of cable shows costs, but I'm pretty sure Paramount Network's previous content slate, even with the multiple miniseries and swath of unscripted productions they had, did not cost $104 million. And no, I don't think Bellator really hikes the number up either, given ViacomCBS owns that property and it's somewhat of a niche thing to begin with. If ViacomCBS cut scripted production at Paramount Network as a cost-cutting move, how do they justify spending over $100 million at the very least? A fraction of the magnitude of what a number of streaming services have invested into far more content in a similar time frame on producing all these movies and miniseries. How much does Kevin Costner cost anyway? It doesn't seem to make any sense. The third big question is where the Displaced unscripted series will be going. Both Lip Sync Battle and Bar Rescue have strong fan bases and solid ratings performance, but neither seems like a perfect fit for any of the other remaining ViacomCBS cable channels. My first personal guess for both was VH1, as it's been somewhat of a content catch-all for shows similar to those as of late, like America's Next Top Model, Wild 'N Out, RuPaul's Drag Race, and, in the case of similar shows to Bar Rescue, the quietly existing new series To Catch a Beautician, which aired this summer, in which reality star Tamar Braxton teams up with a celebrity hairstylist to help clients who have had their hair ruined and confront and reform the beauticians responsible. It feels like a weird mixture of Bar Rescue and Catfish, but I guess it works on VH1 because of that, not in spite of it. A second possibility is Pop, recently brought into the fold with the re-merger and now largely free of scripted series, both due to the redistribution of effort in that regard to Paramount Network and the conclusion of Canadian comedy Schitt's Creek, which Pop helped turn into a smash hit and cult darling. Though, after much fan outcry, they do now produce episodes of the One Day at a Time reboot after it became casualty number 68335 of the exacting knife of Netflix. Lip Sync Battle would fit right in with the network's pop culture-centric focus, but the rationale is harder to find for Bar Rescue. Perhaps if it lands there, it'll be as just a rest home for the show to live out whatever ratings relevancy it has left. Plus, in addition to the original programming about to be displaced, there's also the matter of the few acquired shows Paramount Network runs, chiefly Mom and 2.5 Men. Theoretically, both of these could go back to Comedy Central, assuming they want them, or alternatively, and perhaps more likely, they could languish on Nick at Night until their licensing agreements for the shows run out. They seem just old enough to fit on that channel's schedule, sometime in the late evening, and while I don't necessarily like to entertain the concept of Nick at Night having a use, I guess this would arguably count as one, even if only for a few years at most, until the rights bounce back to, say, TBS or whoever. Under the same rationale, TV Land could have them, which is arguably the main problem with Nick at Night's continued existence in the first place. Paramount Network shows an ambitious vision, a solid gumption, and a conceptual clarity that few other channels in cable seem able to match, and the mountain to realizing that potential took the better part of a decade to climb. With a new peak presented to them, in the task of making Paramount Network a premium destination that can fight with the best of them, ViacomCBS has arguably shown themselves to be too weary too early, and the pivoting content to Paramount Movie Network is not guaranteed to let the channel live up to the aspirations it's taken so long to reach. While it may not be at risk of becoming a gutter-dwelling, low-brow men's channel anymore like it was at the beginning of its trek, Paramount Network risks something far more important in an age where audiences are more fickle and fleeting than ever, toying with positive progress to the point that it becomes abject failure. It is a fate no network can afford, especially now, and Paramount Network's apparent admission of defeat in the announcement of this pivot is already galling. But like I've suggested for the executives of the world, I too won't judge the channel's new direction as an outright downfall too early. It's still up to a year away from launching, and despite the expense, it could prove the thing that puts Paramount Network on the map, making these 2 years as a generalist outlet seem more like a false start. For now, the question as to whether this new peak can be reached successfully is one left up to the stars. Paramount Network isn't the only channel with a questionable future ahead of them. Nick at Night has outlived its original purpose, and I make the case for its demise in this video up here or down in the description. I'll be talking about other major TV channels with worrying roads ahead in multiple new videos on the way soon, so make sure you subscribe to catch all of them. And more new stuff from the world of television every single week. I'm Benzie Johnson Jr., I'm enthusiastic about television, and I'll see you next time.